I would like to call the August 2nd, 2023 Public Works Committee meeting to order, please. Thank you all for once again attending a 7:30 a.m. meeting. Kristen, I'm not seeing anybody online, are you? No. Okay, so right now we have no residents here for the record. We may get some, but right now we don't have any. So let's start with a roll call. Chuck, can you start us off, please?
Chuck Sipple, City Council, Ward 3.
Chris White, Committee.
Marcia Monica, Committee.
Julie Kane, Ward 4 Chair.
Jim Rawlings, Committee, Council, Ward 2.
Abbas Hedri, Committee.
Ken Conrad, Committee.
Roger Pruitt, Committee.
Great, great, great. So I'm not seeing, I know Andrew's out of the country, and I'm not seeing Kyle, but otherwise we have a full boat, and I appreciate that. David Lay, Director of Public Works, Brian Scoville, City Engineer, Kristen Courtney are here. Yes. Sorry? And Todd, I'm sorry. I'm not looking up, Todd, sorry. Alrighty, Roe. So that is, the first order of old business is approve the minutes from July 12, 2023. Do I have any additions, corrections, deletions, anything? If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Chuck. And a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. And all in favor, say aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Then the minutes from July 12, 2023 are approved unanimously. So the next item is potential traffic calming options at locations 4 and 5 along 132nd Street and the High Drive corridor. Obviously, we've had a number of meetings on this, and we're making progress, though, happy to say. So with that, who wants to start? David?
I'll just turn it over to Todd.
Okay.
Todd and Brian did most of the work over the past month, so I'll let them go through it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Todd. Thank you.
Good morning to the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. And it's fairly short and sweet, actually. It's fairly well summarized in the one-page memo that we got there. And Brian, do you have the exhibit to put up on the screen there? So we did meet with the residents that surround the intersection of 132nd Terrace and High Drive. The Logans, the Schweitzers, the Brawls, and the Matthews were represented at that meeting, so they were 4 of the 5 that we had invited to the meeting attended. The one on the southeast corner, or I guess southwest corner, straight south there, McInerney wasn't able to attend. We had a good discussion. It was very amicable discussion and a good group discussion about what they preferred in their location, and we presented them with a couple of different alternatives than we had shown before. One was a choker type of a situation where we narrowed up High Drive, but we were talking about using a mountable type curb on that so they could still park on the choker area itself, so we weren't eliminating as much parking. And then we also presented another alternative that was a raised crosswalk on the north side of the intersection. Had several conversations about those, numerous conversations about those back and forth, and kind of let the neighbors talk amongst themselves and figure out what they liked and didn't like about those two options. And it ended up that, in essence, they kind of defaulted to the Logans, which, fair or unfair, that's kind of what they ended up doing, because that's where the sidewalk impact was and the right-of-way impact was. So after the meeting, we kind of left it at no consensus at the meeting, or they were kind of interested in not doing anything, but deferred to me going out onto site with the Logans on the next morning and having a conversation with them in the field and actually showing them where the sidewalk impacts would be. They talked it over and got back with us later that day and decided that they did not want to give an easement to the city for any sidewalk work, which in essence left us where we had left off with the residential meeting the day before. They prefer that we do nothing at that location. Now, part of that conversation of do nothing, I hate to jump ahead on the agenda to another item, but part of that reasoning behind their do nothing alternative was we had looked at the stop sign that they had requested at 132nd and High Drive and found that the site distances were not there for the yield sign condition. And so we switched that sign out on Friday, July 28th to a stop sign and put a stop bar out there for them. and they felt that would take care of their left turn issues enough that they weren't as worried about doing the traffic calming out on the main street of High Drive, and we're satisfied with that at this point in time, at least to get through the temporary device phase of the project. So based on that...
Todd, you said you
Yes.
put what out there? The stop sign and the what?
The stop sign and the stop bar, the painted stripe that goes along with it on the pavement to bring some extra visibility to that location.
I see, thank you.
It's the white stripe. And so we put that out there. And then based on that conversation, we decided to move forward with our recommendations to this committee that we would not do anything at location 4 and continue with the speed table at location 5 and evaluate how that affects speeds with the rest of the devices along the corridor and with the stop sign now on 132nd Terrace. If that's an acceptable evaluation from the committee's perspective, that's how we'd like to proceed with the installation of temporary devices and then go back and collect data and see how they change. That's my quick summary, so yeah, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Chuck, want to start us?
Todd, what's the, we talked about this last time, but what's the lead time when you place an order for one of these temporary speed tables? They're made out of hard rubber or they're made out of some, what's the lead time? How long will it, from the time the council approves it and you cut the purchase order, how long will it take for us to get it into Leawood?
Weren't we talking about 4 or 5 weeks, Dave? I think that's where we were, weren't we?
Yes, we did get some updated costs, which were cheaper, and so I believe they said it was going to be 6 to 7 weeks to get them, once we cut the PO, which would be on hopefully next Tuesday.
Okay, so that'll be approved in early August, so we'll get these things in late September then, which is unfortunate after school starts. School's starting, what, August 16th, I think, so there's anything else? I mean, you don't have any loaners or anything we can use from another municipality or anything? Okay.
No.
Chris, you were second.
I guess my question was, on our last, during the meeting, there was kind of this feeling like they didn't want 3 speed tables on this. And so during the conversation, there were different options and stuff to prevent having, 3 speed tables through this section. And I looked back at the motion we ended up with was 2 speed tables, 2 flashing lights. What's the general, did you discuss with the public how they felt about doing back to 3 speed tables again?
Not with a full public in terms of like along the entire corridor. We didn't send out another survey or anything like that. We feel like we've gotten quite a bit of feedback from them on what their preferences are. I believe the conversation was depending on what we did at location 4. If we did something like a raised crosswalk, then we didn't want a speed table at High Drive and another speed table at 132nd Terrace and another speed table down at the east end. So we were leaving that open, that if we went with a raised crosswalk, for example, at location 4, we'd probably do something different at location 5. Since we decided not to do anything at location 4, we left the original recommendation of speed table in at 5. That would give us one at the east end of the project, one at the west end at Pawnee, and then one in the middle at High Drive with a speed feedback sign between the 2 at High Drive and Pawnee. And then we'd leave it with no speed feedback sign here, so we can kind of compare the difference. Does the speed feedback sign between speed tables work on the north end and change it any differently than no speed feedback sign at this location?
Okay. I just wondered
that's
what the
fine.
thinking was.
Yep.
Marcia?
So I guess my question is, it's my understanding these have to be picked up during winter because of the snow plows. So if they don't go in till like end of September, 1st of October, how long would they be in?
Probably until the first week in December.
Like 2 months?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about last time also, keeping them up
That work
out there for
money
2 months.
2 months?
Well, during their install, they do have to put some anchors, thank you, into the asphalt pavement. So to pull them off and to replace them won't be as much work as it will be initially. So, I mean, I think it's good to get some data. So we'll get some data and then we'll get some feedback from the residents on which ones they like. And if they want to move, then we can go back out in the spring and either put them back in the same location or look at moving the speed tables around to a different location.
And our intent is to kind of monitor the weather too. So if 1st of December, it's looking like we're not going to have any snow for another 2, 3, 4 weeks. We won't pick them up until we see the first snow is being predicted. And so we may leave them out longer than that. It just depends on how the weather cooperates.
And we can leave them up during a couple snow events because we'll pick our plows up around them so we don't hit them with the plow. But the drivers can pick it up. So if there is a snow, one event or so, it's not going to be that critical.
And these will be reusable, so there is a cost involved, but it's not 100%. It's not like a one and done kind of thing.
Right, we'll store these at probably Public Works, and then if we get another street, if we do a construction project on an arterial street where we're kicking traffic over to a collector or something like that, we can always go out and utilize these on a temporary basis.
So will we be ordering the radar feedback sign, or will we be using one from another location?
So we're proposing to purchase 2 radar feedback signs based on the recommendation from last month, and that's going to be on the agenda Monday at City Council. So the recommendation last month was to purchase 2 speed tables and 2 pairs of radar feedback signs.
So one faces one way, one faces the other.
Correct.
So that's why there's 2, even though they're all on one site. And the cost of the speed tables, the cost of, what's the cost incurred for this temporary solution?
It's about $42,000, and that will cover if we do the 3 speed tables and 1 pair of feedback signs, or if we want 2 speed tables and 2 feedback signs, or 2 pairs. It'll be under $42,000.
Great, thank you, yes.
I've got a question, somewhat embarrassing. How many stop signs are going in on number 4?
1.
Just one on High Drive?
No,
Okay.
it's one on 132nd
On
Terrace.
132nd?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Second question, do we have an idea of what our criteria is when we get the data back from these experiments that we have solved the problem? I mean, certainly there's a lot of emotion in how we do it and everything, but we've kind of, I never completely understood from the data that we had accumulated that there was an issue, and I think we're doing everything correctly, don't misunderstand me, but when we get to the point where we have to decide that we're going to install this, do we have a criteria, quantitative?
No, there's no criteria. It's up to the residents. If they don't sign that petition, then we don't go forward with final installation of permanent traffic calming devices. So it could do nothing to the speed or volume, and if they come back and sign their petition at 75%, then they're agreeable to have these installed. So it's up to the
Okay.
residents.
But we do have objective criteria in
Pardon me?
terms, we do have objective criteria in terms of, we know what the speeds were along the roadway at the 7 different locations, if you recall.
I understand.
And we'll understand what the
I mean,
impacts of these were,
we're-
but, yeah.
If we have a safety issue that we've identified, then I think we ought to have some idea of what solves it. Okay, and I'm certainly very concerned about just having an environment that isn't a racetrack and everything else, but there's been a lot of discussion, and at some point, we're going to have to make a decision, and I just want to know if we have a way, what's the warrants, or a warrant system or something that gives us some guidance on whether we should or shouldn't do anything? Because this is going to all be paid by the city in general, or by?
Well, the developer has agreed to $100,000.
For the permanent ones, not for the test.
Okay, that's fine. I just wondered if we had an idea of, did we have a goal in what we were trying to do?
I don't believe the $100,000 is just for the permanent. It's a $100,000 commitment that could be used. We could, correct? We talked about that, Dave.
It's $100,000 for the permanent traffic calming devices. But that clock starts ticking. It's for 5 years, and it starts ticking when he makes his payment for his permits, which I think is coming up pretty soon. So from that point, the residents will have 5 years to, if they want to move forward with any type of traffic calming, they'll have 5 years to get that final petition in.
Abbas?
So going to what Ken was saying, and I guess with the stop sign option, I know it's pretty late in the game to bring this up, but would it have made sense to just have stop signs added to High Drive, and I guess where it becomes 132nd, and be done with it? Maybe 2 or 3 stop signs, which would slow people down?
Actually, that would be in violation of the MUTCD that we're required to follow. It specifically forbids using stop signs as a traffic calming measure, and there are specific warrants for traffic signs, installations of stop signs at intersections, and it would be on the side street, not on the main street for the predominant location of stop signs. You have to have extenuating circumstances to put it out on the main street, which we don't meet any of those circumstances, so we wouldn't be able to follow the MUTCD guidance and put stop signs on High Drive. Those are in conflict.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Chris, then Chuck.
I was just going to follow up on Ken's comment. It's a very good point of that we do want to make sure that when we, after these have been put in, that we take some data again to make sure we see what happens. But I will point out, some of this is related to that new development village, so it's not all related to the actual data now. Some of it is, you know, the residents' feeling of what could happen later, and they're in some sense of, you know, preventing pass-through traffic. So I think the one question is going to be is, if the residents do decide to do it, I don't think we've fully addressed who's paying it beyond the 100,000. Is this a development, a residential process where they bear that additional cost, or is if the city's going to pick it up? Have we had any conversation on how that gets addressed?
That'll be a council decision if we ever get to that point. There's still a long way to go in the process, putting these devices out, collecting the data, coming back, getting more feedback from the residents to see if we want to move them around. And then at the end of the day, you know, if they can't get 75% signatures to go forward with permanent, then it would just stop. But to kind of answer a little bit, not to answer Ken's question, but expand a little bit, we're proposing to update the traffic calming policy. And once we get through this process, and so that would be, you know, if you are wanting to have warrants or something like that added to the future traffic calming policy, that would be the time to look into that.
Right. Chuck?
As we look at this thing early next year with the data on traffic counts and speeds, what is going to be more important? Whether the neighbors want the speed tables and stop signs and so forth, or whether speeds are reduced. As you all traffic engineers look at this, what's more important, whether they like it or not, or whether or not it actually reduces speeds on High Drive and 132nd?
It's up to the residents. I mean, we want this to be successful, and if, you know, in order to get that 75% petition, it's going to be whatever they want, really. So if we're going to go out there and try and reduce speed, it's going to be a lot of speed tables probably, and that's probably not going to be a successful project.
Okay.
Well, and if I recall, the speeds weren't actually that excessive in the data we took.
They're,
correct?
yeah, they're over 30. They're 32
Some
or
were
so.
50.
Well, keep in mind, we evaluate based on the 85th percentile, and that was in the 30, 31 mile per hour range for the majority of the corridor. There were a couple below 30 and a couple above 30, but for the most part, it was right around 30 to 31 miles per hour for the speeds we would look at. We don't take those outliers of 35, 40, 50,
Thank you.
50,
That's what
60
I
miles per hour.
recalled, was that
Yeah,
the measurement point we had was well within
It's
reasonable.
about
There were
5,
outliers,
yeah.
certainly, but
It's about 5 to 7 miles per hour over the posted speed limit, which isn't totally unusual for a roadway of that type.
yeah. So, I mean, we wouldn't, based on the data we collected, the city wouldn't go out there and say, we've got an urgent issue that we had to resolve. This is really being driven by residents' concerns of pass-through traffic related to the new development and potential increasing speeds from there.
Right, there's a perceived speed issue on the roadway by the residents, which translates into a perceived safety issue, but all of our research has shown speeds are higher than the posted speed limit, but there have been no crashes along this roadway in the last 3 years at all from one end to the other. So to pose it as a safety issue would be a little bit of a stretch from a data perspective. Again, though, perception is very important in how people feel about the street that they're living on with their children playing in the front yards, et cetera. And so we want to make sure that they have a feeling that it's safe. But in terms of pure engineering data, the speeds aren't an outlier. You know, it's not an unusual scenario for the type of facility that's out there in the posted speed limit, and there's no crashes along the corridor, so it's a relatively safe corridor.
Just a quick thing, what's a recommended neighborhood speed? Is it 25?
It's posted 25 miles per hour, yes.
Okay, and that's generally citywide?
Yes, that's city policy.
Ken?
And a lot of the beginning
Kim,
of
talk
the
into your mic.
part, oh, is it on?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So a lot of this issue that we were addressing in the beginning, I was under the impression was kind of fell under the terminology of cut-through, and which translates to volume, which, will that still be an issue even if they're going 25?
Well, definitely the volume was always an issue, and then the fear of the increased volume once the development is an absolute factor. It's
That's fine.
Yeah, so our
been there,
studies have
gonna-
shown, we've done several studies where we used cameras and we placed them at the entrances and we tracked vehicles, and there's not a lot of cut-through. So that's not, I know the residents may have mentioned cut-through, but currently there's not a lot of cut-through, but they are concerned about the future and what that development to the south may bring.
And I'd add, just because of that information and since gathering that information, we have communicated with the residents in this committee that our primary focus as engineers studying the corridor has been along speeds. And so that everything we've talked about has been how do we help minimize excessive speeding? And so, as David mentioned, if we put speed tables along the whole corridor, that would be an effective tool, but of course it wouldn't be a successful project.
So, just a quick thing. I guess what the residents are after, or the overall goal is probably twofold then. One is to cut down the speed and potentially discourage people from taking this route to reduce the volume.
Right.
Right, okay.
And my question is, so we put them down as soon as we can. We pick them up prior to the snow events, and then will we put them back down come spring and then continue to collect data? Remind me, I know we had a timetable there, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
I think we had a schedule in the last meeting.
Yeah, we
Kind of,
did, and I'm sorry. Trick question.
So if we put them down and they're down for 2 months and the residents want to move forward with them, then they can just submit a petition back to us. But my view was that we would go through and collect the data towards the end of this year, probably in late October, November, get some more data, and then send out a petition or, have another Public Works Committee meeting to discuss that so they could come to the meeting and voice their opinions on if they like the devices, or if they want different devices, or if they want them shifted around.
Right, and then this isn't just so they know too, this isn't going to be an ongoing process where we try this, and we try this, and we try this, and we keep incurring costs. The idea here is to find out, does it work, and if it works and everybody passes the 75 approval, then we're done. To reinitiate this would take the whole process start over, and then they may very well incur a cost. That's what I understood. Is that at this point, Scott Lambers had promised them that they would not incur a cost, and that's how I would vote, because I was in the room when it was said. So, but I'm only one vote. But again, if this keeps coming back up in 2-3 years, when there is some development along there, then we may, then they may very well incur a cost. So it's kind of like, you better pay attention now and better figure this out now, because this is not going to be an ongoing, reoccurring thing.
That's right. And if they want the devices back out next year, we can always run them out all of next year, and then they could have a year of driving with these
Right.
devices. But yeah, I don't, I don't anticipate if they wanted different devices. I think the only other devices would be getting tubular markers to narrow streets up in certain locations.
Right.
I don't see us buying any more speed tables after this.
Right. Yes, Chuck?
I had a question about location number 1. That's kind of close to the school, and I think kids cross the street down there. What is the surface of the speed table? Is it a rubber mat? Hopefully it's not anything that's slippery, because the kids will be crossing the street maybe on top of that thing, and I want to make sure that they're not ride their bikes or whatever. It's not going to be anything that's going to cause another problem.
So What you're seeing is it's a proposed final plan. This is where a raised crosswalk would be at. What we're going to do temporarily is we're going to put a speed table in that location, but the crossing is still going to be over at Pawnee. It'll just get the vehicles to slow down before the crosswalk, because we can't meet ADA with a temporary speed table, so we can't use it as a crosswalk. So they won't be walking across it. It's just to slow the vehicles and get it close to where the raised crosswalk would be at.
Could you put that timeline back up, whoever did that? So July, August, Public Works purchased and installed temporary devices, so, and then, oh, I see, and then the current, okay. And then new tasks, so it's just saying here, I guess we never said specifically when we were going to do the permanent on, am I reading this correctly? January 2024, we reviewed the data from the few months the temps are down.
Right, and then it's really, you could make a recommendation if the residents would like to have the devices put back out for a little bit longer. At that point, you can make that recommendation. We can go back out and install them. But then as soon as we pull them out, then it would be up to the residents to do a petition back to us for the final install.
And what's the life of those devices? I mean, is that like you use them for a few months and then they're beat to heck and you can't use them anymore? Or how's that work?
They're good. They should be good for several years. These are individual panels, so even if we had a damaged ramp on it, you're just going to damage a couple pieces. We would just be able to replace those 2 pieces.
Okay.
So they should last for several years.
Okay, Abbas, and then Jim?
So, wanted to talk about cost, I guess. What was the anticipated cost of the permanent structures?
So we had that on the last agenda, so Brian's going to look for that.
Sorry, I wasn't here last time. Should have.
Jumping ahead.
Jim, do you have a question they might be able to answer in the meantime?
Yeah, I was curious, refresh my memory on the 75% of petition signers. Is that 75% of all the residents that would vote either up or down whether they want the traffic calming devices, or is it 75% and you take a simple vote of up or down?
But 75% of the property owners that are adjacent to the roadway, and so
Adjacent to the roadway, okay.
there are 73 residents.
Okay. And so what happens if the percentage is we don't want them? Is this over?
Yeah, it would not go forward if they don't meet the 75%, according to the current policy.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Brian does have the cost on the screen here, if it's.
So it's 130 to 170,000 for the permanent devices, right? Recommended.
I would just
alternative.
note on that, this table hasn't been updated based on location 4 and the do nothing option. So it is about 35 to 45,000. I'm sorry, 30 to 45,000 high. So we're talking 100 to 140.
Right. So 100 to 140, and then we would add the 42,000 for the temporary, so say 142,000. If the developer's paying 100,000, the rest of the 42 needs to come from somewhere, right?
I'll add, we have, location 2 has the feedback signs. Those will have already been paid for by the city and installed, so that would be, so your cost really would be 80 to 110,000.
Right, but the city did incur the cost of putting that, or they would have put that anyways.
Right, correct. These previous city administrator, Scott Lambers, had provided or offered to pay for the temporary devices, but even though we call them temporary, they would be installed in a permanent fashion. And we can always remove them. They're pretty easy to remove, but if we move forward and keep it out there, it would just stay there. Even if they decide they don't want to do any traffic calming, but they do like those signs, it's potentially those would just stay out there.
Because I was just going back to the point that the chair made about, coming back to this issue at a future point, or kind of rediscussing this, and how do you spread out that cost and who incurs that cost. And if, say, 75% of the neighborhood signs off, then do they incur any cost? Or, because at some point in time, I thought there was a discussion that when a neighborhood signs a petition, they are also bear responsibility of the cost. Is that correct?
Well, the cost that will be determined by the governing body, so it's up to the governing body on how to pay for it, but we do have 100,000 from the developer.
Okay. Thank you.
So the 20 to 30,000 for the speed feedback signs, that is a permanent solution, so that could be recouped from the developer pronto.
If they submit their 75% signatures back on the petition, I think it'd be to go out there and put it out there without having 75% signatures saying that they agree to have that sign out there.
Because my
Might
only
be
concern,
problematic.
going back for a moment, sorry, David, is if the neighbors do actually incur cost at some point in time, how many of them would want to do that? If they have to shell out hard dollars at some point in time. If not, then I guess that's okay.
Well, what you're talking about is the benefit district, I believe is the term, and that's on just a kind of a situation where someone says, we want to change something. And this situation is related to this development, and as a result, there were negotiations with the developer to pay for $100,000 of these actions. So the cities, Scott Lambert had made also commitments that in order to keep existing residents happy with a new development, that we would make sure this is addressed. So there are different conditions. I'm very big supporter of in benefit districts that residents pay for their own developments.
No, I'm not trying to-
But in this case, there are differences. But again, there's a very big question whether 75% of the residents are going to want any of these things.
That's
So-
where I was going, not necessarily wanting people to pay for it, but I just wanted, we're going through all of this discussion on the merits or demerits of what may happen, but at some point in time, when people realize they actually have to pay for it, if it comes to that, if it doesn't, then I guess we're fine, then it's a moot point. But if someone had to pay for it, they didn't want to do that, now we're at 70%, obviously the whole plan fails.
Right, we've generally, if my understanding is corrected, the city has taken, up to a reasonable level, we've generally taken the cost factor off of the discussion and decisions. But there's still a very big, real issue with the residents of living with these devices. The flashing signs, I don't think anyone has problems, but the chokers, the median islands, the speed tables are all very real. There's pros and cons to each one of them, depending on where they're located. So, but we've taken the cost factor off for the most part, and developers can address that. But the residents really still have to deal with whether or not they want those kind of.
Because whatever we do is also going to set the precedent
Yes.
for the future and also for the traffic calming policy that's going to be made in the future, so.
Yes, and we take that very seriously. And it won't come to city council without the recommendation of this body one way or the other, So ultimately, the city council will absolutely want your input in what you think, what the residents have to do the 75. Because I'm with you on that. We could spend, $300,000 on this little stretch and it's not going to pass me. It's not, because we are setting the precedent, and there's a whole lot of traffic up, or a whole lot of 135th left that we could potentially, spend a gazillion dollars on having, some kind of mediation. So.
And that's why it's important. I appreciate Todd holding the standards, why, you can't put a stop sign. We've still got to make sure, because like you said, any exception we make here, that's a precedent. So it's really important where Todd and David and Scott are saying, hey, or Brian are saying, these are the requirements. We don't deviate from these just because it's convenient, so.
Yeah, because as I've said 100 times, 132nd between Mission and Row is used as a cut-through, as much, if not more, and at speeds at least, you know what I mean? So there's a mirror, just on that stretch alone, between Mission and Rowe, there's a mirror going on of how many people are cutting through. I live on that side, so I see it more, but yeah, everybody and their dog, you know, comes up to 132nd and goes over to Rowe. So that's as big of a problem or big of the situation, and around the school, similar, you know, it's just the other side of the street. So, yeah, whatever we're doing here, we're going to hear it again, no doubt about it, from other residents as it develops out. It's not developed out either, but it'll be coming. So, yeah, I take it very seriously.
Right, and I do want to compliment staff.
Oh, gosh,
They've
yes.
done, you know, they've been very patient with, I guess, everyone, residents and us,
Yeah, yeah,
in what they've done, and I think it's been thorough, so thank you.
yeah. Marcia?
Well, as you guys remember, this group came in a few years ago. Same question, same issue, same problem.
But that was like '01 or something.
And the deal was, they were gonna have to pay for it. So it dissolved and went away.
And frankly, that's
So-
what my concern.
Well, so this is a little different situation, because there are funds pledged to this area because of the development on between 132nd and 135th. So it's a little different that, yes, I think there's an expectation that because there are funds available, that residents are not going to have to pay. Now, if it goes over, that's a different question, and that's a city council question about whether to pay the difference or not.
And frankly,
And-
Marcia, didn't mean to cut you off, but that was my concern, what happens if it goes over?
And that's a good question. I guess I have two questions. When is Mission Road going to be completed?
Great
What
question.
part? What
The
part?
whole thing. When is the
So-
whole thing done?
Well, I can break it down a little bit.
2030.
So the north project, we'll start with that one, from 133rd Street north to 127th will be completed in September. Right now, that's what we're
Oh,
seeing.
September, not by the time school starts.
No, so the 133rd Street intersection will be opened to traffic next week. August 8th is our goal, under a stop control. The signal isn't operational because some of the equipment hasn't been delivered yet. It's a procurement issue. We've ordered the equipment well in advance. It just hasn't come in, and it's been delayed. So the contractor has everything ready. As soon as that equipment's here, he's going to have that signal fired up, potentially having the signal open and the intersection open before school starting. Right now, we're thinking literally the 15th will be when the signal's open. But again, because of past performance, we're not hedging any bets on that, right? So it'll be open, signal will be open at 133rd Street as soon as possible. The pedestrian crosswalk signal in front of Mission Trail will be open as soon as possible. It's about 2 weeks behind 133rd Street. As soon as those are done, we'll have a lot of improvement for pedestrian connectivity and vehicular access, but traffic will remain closed to northbound until we get the road paved. We're talking September when the road is reopened to two-way traffic. We've already met with the school district. We met yesterday. We're meeting again next week with the school district to go over these items and prepare the residents for it. The south project isn't scheduled to be completed until April of 2024. Okay, that was the plan all along. That date hasn't changed, but it is the interim milestones have been impacted by utility delays. It's about 6 weeks behind schedule. They will open to two-way traffic in front of Prairie Star from their entrances south to 143rd Street. They will do that approximately 3 weeks after school starts. So there will be a 3-week period where we have some struggles at the beginning of school. It's unfortunate. We've done as much as we can. We're going to continue to work with the school to minimize that. It is a challenge. So, but that is the overall big picture schedule.
And what about 133rd to 135th?
Oh, so that is technically part of the South project, although we do anticipate the contractor reopening that segment before the April 24th, or April of 2024 timeframe. So I don't have a date set for that. My hope is that he'll open that when we open the North project from September, in September. So we would have traffic all the way from 127th to 135th. He's not contractually obligated to do that, but we are working with the contractor to see if that's possible.
Thank you. Any more questions about the potential traffic calming options along 132nd Street? And if not, is anybody prepared to make a motion? Chuck?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the purchase and install of the 3 speed tables and the radar feedback signs along 132nd and High Drive section, and take that to the city council for approval.
3 or 2? 2 speed tables or 3?
3.
Three at 1, 3, and 5.
So the previous meeting, we already made a recommendation, and that's already on council's agenda for location 1 and 3, as well as the speed signs at 2. So that's being carried forward. I would just comment, if you'd like to restate that commitment, by all means, but otherwise, we're preferring to look for your recommendation regarding locations 4 and 5.
Will they be on the same meeting? If we do 4 and 5 today, are they in the same meeting? Because that doesn't make any sense to me to chop
So-
it up. To city council,
right.
that is.
So it is on the agenda for Monday, but I believe I can update it today. The staff report to reflect today's motion, but we would probably need you to add something about modifying the July motion to include
1, 3, and 5.
the 3 speed tables at 135 and the 1 pair of feedback signs at location 2.
And position number 4 has been,
And then position 4
it was eliminated.
is eliminated.
Don't we already have something at location 2? There's a radar sign there?
Correct. But just to make sure it's clear, because we did have that motion last month, which was to purchase 2 speed tables and 2 pairs of feedback signs, but now we only need the 1 pair of feedback signs with 3 speed tables. So it might be clear if you just say to modify last month's motion, and you recommend the following, just so we have a clear motion on the entire corridor.
Okay, I'd like to withdraw my first motion and make a second motion, which is to install speed tables at 1, 3, and 5, and a motion detector at location 2.
And also to amend the previous July 20th.
To amend that, to include the new revised motion.
Draw it. Get it off the table.
And to remove speed table number, or device at number 4.
Maybe just say no device at site 4.
No device at Station 4.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second of that mess? We have a motion from Chuck Zippel and a second from Jim Rawlings. All in agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Well, with that, it passes unanimously.
Now, let me ask you one question. I'm glad we have that motion approved. Have the neighbors all been informed that this is what's coming down, 1, 3, and 5?
Not officially, no, because the last motion made by this committee was just for 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I'm worried that no one was here representing the neighborhood this morning, and I don't want to have a big dust-up if they find out through reading our minutes that we're going with 1, 3, and 5, and have a big commotion of that, because I think we're very close to the city council approving this motion, and I just want to make sure they're aware of it. And if your conversations with them encompassed all this, good. If not, I'm a little concerned.
We do have 3 folks that are kind of our primary contacts, Rachel Rubin and Adam Brawl and Mark Davidson. We can send out an email to those folks and ask them to let everybody know that this is going to council on Monday and that this is what
Okay.
we have
Thank you for
agreed to
doing
based
that.
on your
That makes
motion.
sense.
So that way they can disseminate that information to the neighborhood before the council meeting.
And that they have the ability to come and speak.
Yes.
Thank you, Todd.
Well,
Yes.
Todd, I think it's important to do what you can to make sure it goes, because I think those 3 people are very pro installation of devices. I think it's important to do whatever is possible to get it to everybody so that everybody's aware of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Jim?
And the
Thank you.
key word is temporary, too.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Well, to follow up on Chuck's concern, you mentioned that there was not really consensus when you met with the neighbors. So aren't we now taking the lack of consensus and making a decision? And they've had the opportunity to raise their concerns. And we, based on your report, that's your recommendation, and that's what we voted on. So to my thinking, they've had the opportunity for their input, but they couldn't come to an agreement. Is that
Well,
my
and keep in
understanding?
mind, we were only talking with the folks that were immediately around the intersection of 132nd and High Drive that would be directly affected by the recommended alternatives we were talking with them about. So it wasn't something that we talked to the entire east half of the corridor and said, these are the changes that have been made. So it was a very localized conversation, and the folks that were directly impacted. And I want to make it clear, too, when I say we didn't come to a consensus, they were not antagonistic in any way, shape, or form. They were very amenable to the conversation. They appreciated the opportunity to have a conversation amongst themselves and with us. And the lack of consensus was simply that some of them liked the choker option, some of them liked the raised speed table option, some of them deferred to their other neighbors that were more impacted by it, said, I'll do whatever you guys want to do. And in the end, it was kind of, if we can't get this sidewalk easement, then let's just not do anything here and see how it plays out. And they were comfortable with that as the residents immediately around that intersection. So that's the consensus that we came to, is do nothing was okay with them since they were getting their stop sign, and we'll see how it plays out from there.
Thank you.
And I guess at one of the earlier meetings, they did submit a signed petition, didn't they? Or a lot of neighbors signed up.
They did do the 75.
They did do the 75, right?
5%. They
Yeah.
had one petition that
Yeah,
has,
they had over 80%, I believe. They had quite a bit.
yeah, they've already done that one time.
And we've had public meetings where we talked about them, and we've done surveys to find out what their preferred alternatives were. So it's not like this is going to be a surprise that we're doing certain things, but I agree, it's wise to let them know what the final decision has been and that they have an opportunity to comment, so.
And an estimated time for install,
Yes.
early October, late September, just so they know that it's coming down the road. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So we will have this before City Council on Monday, and then we will not have another meeting with the residents about this. There is nothing planned.
That's correct, until probably January, February, if we want to meet to discuss the results of
Right.
the speed studies and volume.
And then, except for the signs, everything will have been pulled by January, February.
Correct.
So it'll kind of gone back. So, all right, well, if there's nothing further, then that is the last, there is no new business, so we are able to adjourn, and yes, Chuck?
I just had one other side comment. I drove that area today on my way to the meeting, but I wondered if you could all take a look at the sight lines for the stop sign southbound High Drive as it intersects 132nd Street. There's a big bush that sort of hides the stop sign as you enter from the north, headed south. If you could just look at that, maybe some should trim that so the stop sign is more apparent. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll send that off to code enforcement. That's their responsibility to notify the property.
We'll just put it on their punch list. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, with that, yes?
Unrelated to all of this, I've noticed on Windsor Drive, and I think 144th, there might be a stop sign missing unless there wasn't. Because every other street has one except for that. And I don't know if someone's ripped it off and has never gotten installed. It's in Steeplechase, right as you enter from Windsor going south. It's, I think, the Second Street that runs.
Yeah, thank you for notifying us. Happy to look into that. We'll have data if there was one there, and if there was, we'll reinstall it. No problem.
Okay, seeing none, then I am adjourning the August 2nd meeting. August, can you believe it? God, it's depressing, isn't it? Thank you, everyone.